Hello, my name is Dr. Funda Goldman. I'm a licensed naturopathic physician in Stratford, Connecticut in the United States. And today I was hoping to talk to you about some techniques in hydrotherapy that are fairly unique to naturopathic medicine. And they're related. One is called Magic T-shirt and the other is called Magic Socks. Before we get too far in this, let's just note that the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. For any problems that are persistent or worsening, please consult with a qualified medical professional for individual medical advice. So hydrotherapy, there's some different terms that are related and they kind of sound the same. But when I talk about hydrotherapy, what I mean is the therapeutic use of water to treat disease. This is also known traditionally as water cure. Um, Hydropathy sounds very close, but it's the use of hot and cold. It doesn't necessarily involve water. Water therapy is kind of close, but water therapy is more physical exercise and therapies in water, such as working in a pool. So in this case, it's just hydrotherapy is more of an umbrella term for any type of therapy that involves the use of water. So magic t-shirt, let's go through the method and then we'll talk about why this works and what you can use it for. Magic t-shirt, what you do is you take a regular warm shower or bath, and then after that you take a thin cotton t-shirt, and it has to be thin, and you soak that in a bit of cool water and you wring it out so that it's still moist but it's not dripping with water. So right after the hot shower or bath, you put this cold t-shirt on, and then after you put the cold wet t-shirt on, you put a thick drier layer on top, such as a dry sweatshirt or a wool sweater, and then you leave that on for at least 30 minutes, but you can go to bed with it, sleep with it, through the night if you so choose. So technique, but why does this work? I mean, you get an old t-shirt, an old sweatshirt, and some water, and why is this magic? Well, it actually is very profoundly activating for especially the circulatory system. So what happens is with the warm water, the blood vessels on the surface of the body will dilate and blood will come to the surface of the body. So that's after the hot shower or bath. Then when you put the cool t-shirt on, it pushes the blood, because the blood vessels on the surface constrict, it pushes the blood back to the center of the body. And then what happens is that the body, the body realizes that the blood isn't optimal because it's been pushed inside and it really does need more blood on the surface. So then to reestablish equilibrium, the body will respond by pushing the blood back to the surface. So what happens is that through this action, it actually kind of creates a pumping action, and it really revs up the circulatory system. This increases blood flow, and by increasing blood flow throughout the body, it helps to bring blood with higher levels of oxygen and nutrition to the body, so it infuses them with some, kind of fresh blood, and then helps to remove toxins and inflammatory molecules. So it kind of clears out stuff that's not really optimal in the tissues. And especially because you're doing the magic t-shirt therapy on the chest area, sort of on the upper third of the body, but in the core of the body, near the core of the body, what happens is that it's really good at drawing congestion out of areas such as the lungs, the head, the sinuses. So if you have something like a cold or flu or allergies or something like that, and it's really stuffing you up in your lungs, in your head, you can use this kind of therapy to draw it all out. So I mentioned a couple simple things you can use it for, but magic t-shirt is used for things like just general immune stimulation or chronic inflammation, infections, because again, it has this kind of tonic effect for the circulatory system. By getting good circulation in the system, it's also sort of cardiovascular circulation. It also affects the lymphatic circulation. And when the lymphatic circulation starts moving, it helps to bring white blood cells, which are sort of the really important cells for the immune system, and it draws them into deeper areas of the body. It can also be very effective at drawing out congestion from the lungs and the sinuses. Also, congestive type headaches, So maybe if you get a headache from sort of a sinus infection or allergy, that sort of thing, where you just have a lot of mucus and fullness in the head, it draws that out. Teething, actually, magic t-shirt can be really great, and parents really do think it's magical when they try this with their kids who are teething. It's really helpful because, again, the teething, the gums and that little mouth are a bit swollen, and so when you use something like magic t-shirt, it draws a bit of that fluid out of the head, and so it just makes it more comfortable for the kids. And as a notable and happy side effect also for the parents is that magic t-shirt tends to make people it can make people kind of sleepy. So in addition to helping with teething, I've heard from parents that actually their kids sleep through the night, so they're pretty excited about that. Also things like ear congestion, sore throat. So again, where there's a little bit of, fluid buildup in the throat or in the ears, this can help draw that out. Also, because we're dealing with, pretty directly with the upper body, muscle and joint pain in the upper body. So if you have like neck pain, shoulder pain, it depends on what's causing the problem. But if there's a little bit of inflammation, a little bit of congestion there could be helpful, just with sort of clearing that out. And again, because we're sort of talking in the middle of the body, this is considered a general body therapy. So it does affect all areas of the body. And as such, it is actually pretty good as a detoxification method. It is a stimulating therapy, so it can also be helpful with some kinds of depression, fatigue, and insomnia because it does really sort of like rev you up, at least initially. Contraindications. So if somebody has something called cold allergy where they're literally allergic to the cold, this isn't a good idea to use this therapy. Anybody who has a weak heart and or lungs, things like tachycardia, asthma, high blood pressure, deep vein thrombosis, stroke, any kind of major cardiovascular issue or lung issue, they shouldn't use this. It's going to be too stimulating, especially directly on the chest and back. Hemorrhage, because you have that pumping action, it can make some kinds of bleeding worse. Some skin conditions are worse from water, since you're using water here. Some skin conditions may be contraindicated for this therapy. Any kind of open wound or lesion, recent surgery, if your sutures haven't really closed, you don't want to use, and you haven't been cleared to use water, like take a shower, take a bath, you shouldn't do this because all that water can open up wounds that are trying to heal. You may not want to do this in the evening, but again, it depends on how long you're using it. If you just use it for the recommended 30 minutes, it's going to be fairly stimulating, and you may not want to use it in the evening because it might wake you up and keep you up. But if you keep it on, a lot of people actually get sleepy. Kids and adults get sleepy, and so it actually helps with sleep. So it depends on how long you keep the t-shirt and sweatshirt on. Somebody who's going through a lot of physical, mental, emotional instability, they're already, overstimulated. They don't need some kind of stimulating therapy like this. Anybody who has an inability to detect temperature by touch, they shouldn't do this because, they don't want to use water that's too hot or cold and injure themselves. And people who are just very severely weak or exhausted, again, this can be overstimulating for their system if their system doesn't have a strong enough response to the challenge from the cold, wet t-shirt. So, things to consider. So a few notes about the magic t-shirt treatment is that you do want to avoid extreme hot and cold. It doesn't need to be extremely hot and cold, but a typical warm shower and then cool to cold application with the t-shirt's all you really need. The t-shirt, and the thing is people worry because they're thinking, oh, I just took this hot shower and now this cold t-shirt, who wants to put that on? But it actually only stays cool on the skin for about a minute or two, and then, when the blood vessels kind of shrink back. But then as the body responds, within a couple minutes, actually that, thin cotton t-shirt can get quite warm because the body's responding by pushing the blood back to the surface. So again, that kind of cool or cold response doesn't last too long. And some people actually, after 30 minutes, they really want to take it off because it's gotten too warm. So that's, just in case people have concerns about that. The other thing is if you use this on little kids, once they start to get warm, they may want to take it off. They may not tell you that, but that may be why. And the other thing is they can fall asleep with this overnight because it'll be dry, especially if you use a thin t-shirt. If you don't use a thin t-shirt, if you use a thick one, it's got a lot of water in it, that may still be wet. But if you use a thin cotton t-shirt, your body, should be able to dry that out, through its response. But little kids, they tend to get kind of sleepy, so you might want to do this kind of therapy in the evening, to make sleep easier for them. But if you can try to keep it on the kids for at least 30 minutes before they kick it off, that's usually helpful. So magic socks, this is kind of a similar method, except that you're working on the feet and using socks instead of a t-shirt and sweatshirt. So again, what you do is you take a regular warm shower or bath, and then after that you immediately put on thin cotton socks that have been soaked in cool water, then wrung out. So they're moist, but they're not dripping with water. And then over the wet socks, wet cotton socks, you put dry, thick wool socks on top. So the thick wool socks will insulate the cotton socks so that the body can respond to them and go through that, creating that pumping action again. And again, you want to leave these on for about 30 minutes, but you can fall asleep with them. That's not a problem. And sleep through the night with them if you want. And sometimes people will kick off the socks in the middle of the night because their feet do get, pretty warm once their blood is recirculating back to the surface. And it has a similar mechanism to the magic t-shirt, creating that pumping action, but it's not as strong. So what's nice about the magic socks is that it doesn't have as many contraindications. So the things like, weak lungs and weak heart and things like that, because we're dealing with a smaller surface area of the body and it's farther away from the core and farther away from the heart and the lungs, it's not quite as stimulating. So you can use it in more instances, but it doesn't work as strongly as a magic t-shirt. It's also better for the lower half of the body because, again, you're directly stimulating the circulation in the lower half of the body. So indications for magic socks, so somewhat similarly, but to a lesser degree, immune stimulation, chronic inflammation and infections, poor circulation, these are all helped by magic socks. To some degree, lung and sinus congestion, it may not work as well as a magic t-shirt, so if there are no contraindications for either, you can try the magic socks. If that's not strong enough, you can move up to magic t-shirt and see if that works a little bit better. But if there are contraindications, obviously avoid whichever one is not the best in your particular situation. It may be strong enough to help with some congestive headaches. It's also good for helping with pain, congestion, and arthritis in the lower legs and feet. So especially things like gout, for example. I've actually used therapy such as this, contrast therapy, with a woman who was elderly in her 80s, I believe, and she had gout in her feet, and she also had a heart condition. So I wanted to increase the circulation in her legs to help dissolve the uric acid crystals that were forming the tophi or gout kind of nodes in her toes. And so using this sort of method helped her so that she didn't have pain and she could start walking again. And magic socks, again, it can help with fatigue and it can help with insomnia. Fatigue, if you use it for, again, a shorter period of time, such as 30 minutes, if you leave them on longer, the blood is going to start pooling in the feet and it's going to make people kind of sleepy. So whether you use it for fatigue or insomnia is time dependent. So just note that. Contraindications for magic socks. So cold allergy, again, if you're allergic to cold, not a good idea. Hemorrhage, again, we don't want to stimulate, additional hemorrhaging through this pumping action. Skin conditions that are worse from water, not a good idea. Open wounds, lesions, recent surgery, not a good idea as much before. Physical, mental, emotional instability. This may be too stimulating. It might be too much for some people. They might need more gentle therapies. And again, the inability to detect temperature by touch. So there you go. Two similar, related, but slightly different techniques to help you with different ailments. And again, it's people are pretty shocked by the effects. You know, they think, oh, it's just a t-shirt or a pair of socks and some water. Like, what's the big deal? But then when they, they're sort of curious. They're like, oh, I'll try it. And then when they actually see the effects, they're like, oh, no wonder why they call it magic. Because you really kind of pull out this, very effective therapy through very simple means. So in any case, I hope it's been informative for you and helpful in terms of perhaps a new way of working with, especially hydrotherapy, to help people feel better. Thank you for your time, and until the next one, take care.